How to Train a Happy Mind is a production of the nonprofit Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment. Our podcasts and programs are free and ad-free thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. If you'd like to support us, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. While you're there, you can also join our Train a Happy Mind community for live discussions and meditations. Or you can order a copy of my book, How to Train a Happy Mind, featuring a foreword by the Dalai Lama. I'm Scott Snibbe, and this is How to Train a Happy Mind. We've reached the last in our series of episodes this year on Buddhism's 6 perfections. The final perfection is described as emptiness, wisdom, or insight. They're all different words to describe the indescribable moment when we discover ourselves to be utterly interconnected with all of life, the universe, and everything. My guest for this powerful but difficult to understand subject is Geshe Sherab. For those unfamiliar with his title, Geshe, it describes those who have completed a 20-year course of study in Tibetan Buddhism to become one of its most highly qualified teachers and scholars. The Dalai Lama is a Geshe. In my conversation with Geshe Sherab, he shares some powerful insights into emptiness, including how it isn't just a philosophical exercise, but a practical, ultimate antidote to anguish, craving, loneliness, and so many of life's other difficulties. Geshe Sherab also shares stories from his own life, including times when he felt a bit lonely as a Tibetan who left his culture in order to share the ancient wisdom of Buddhism with contemporary Westerners like me and many of you who listen to our podcast. I think you're going to enjoy listening to this conversation just as much as I enjoyed having it. Geshe Sherab, it's a pleasure to have you on How to Train a Happy Mind. I've had the privilege of attending your teachings on Zoom and in person, and I've been so impressed with your humility and your wisdom. So thank you for joining me today on the podcast.
No, thank you very much for having me here.
You know, something that comes to mind is that the very first time I attended your teachings on Zoom, I was struck by noticing that you and I are probably close to the same age. And, I couldn't help but looking at your life and my life and seeing, we've lived very different lives. It's like the same time frame from the end of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. But I wonder if you could just start out by talking about your life and how you grew up and how you became a monk and a geshe, a teacher, how you came to America and so on.
I was born in western part of Nepal in the mountain region called Manang, a small village, in a Buddhist family. And we have 5 boys. I'm the second oldest. And in that area, and also in many other Himalayan regions, there is traditions for the family to send one of the child to the monastery. My mom thought I should be home, but my dad thought I should be the one who is going to the monastery. And I studied there for 10 years before I went to Serache Monastery for further study for my Geshe. And then I studied 14 more years in Sera and graduated as Geshe. And then went to Yume Tantric College for 1 year.
I think when people hear the term tantric college, it sounds quite exciting. I wonder if you can explain what happens at tantric college for people who aren't familiar with it.
Not so exciting for us. Normally, in the rituals, some monks and geshes will study by themselves, learn by themselves individually. There are many experts in terms of rituals, but it is not part of the curriculum itself. And so then they go to the Tantric college as a part of the curriculum for that. There, you study the tantric path, and then you have debate class on tantric, among the geshes. And then you have to attend all different pujas, the rituals. And then you also have to learn how to draw mandala and those things a little bit. And if individually interested, they can learn much more. But at least you have to study the basic as part of the curriculum there.
And did you want to come to America, or were you sent to America?
Yeah, I was sent to America after I finished my studies. I came back to Sarah and I was doing some short retreat, The international office, they sent a request to Lama Sabaran Buddha to teach the small study group here in Santa Fe in Taos. So that is how I end up in Taos in 2001. I had never heard about Taos before. Never heard New Mexico.
This may sound like a funny question, but in coming to Taos, you leave your culture, your language, a monastery, your family, friends. Did you ever get lonely and miss, your homeland? And
Yeah, of course, I do miss. And I grew most of my life since I was 8 in the monastery. Even with my family, biological family, I didn't spend so much time, most of my life I spent in the monastery, grew up there. So being very far away by yourself, definitely sometimes you miss.
and how did you deal with those feelings? I mean, you have this huge body of Buddhist teachings to draw on.
Yeah, you cannot have everything what you want, no matter where you are. The positive side, negative side in everywhere, in every place, in every part of the country, every part of the world. And if you just focus on what you don't have, then you will feel lonely, miserable, unhappy. But if you focus on the positive side, good side of what you have here, then that helped me. And there are a lot of other positive sides compared to Kathmandu, in Taos or Santa Fe, there's less pollution. The air is much more clean. I like to walk. There's nice places to walk. And also I get to have maybe more free time here for myself in the monastery because you all are together all the time. So the moment you get out of your room, you meet someone. And so sometime when you meet someone and you started talking, and then again, you go a little further, you meet someone, and sometimes you might not have so much time for yourself to do things that you want to do. And so I think having that, again, extra time is also helpful, beneficial sometimes. And also, to learn people's mind in a different cultures. It helped me for my own spiritual growth and my understandings of different people, human mind from different cultures, the way they are shaped and they think, influenced by their upbringing, culture, and that. And also here, people ask a lot of questions, and I like that. Even though I might don't have all the answers, sometimes I have some answers, sometimes I don't. But I really enjoy the questions, whether I have the answer or not. And when they ask questions where I don't have answer, it helped me to reflect, contemplate from different perspectives, from different angles, which I have never thought before.
I realize that those of us in centers like the one in Santa Fe, we get an education that you formerly could only get in a monastery. It's very unique the way that you and other teachers have been sharing. So I'm very grateful for it. Thank you for dedicating your time to teaching us so thoroughly and accurately and deeply in ways that weren't accessible to people who aren't ordained until very recently.
Oh, no, thank you very much. When I teach, I also learn myself. So it is also helping me.
So we're here to talk about emptiness. This year we've done a series on the 6 perfections. And we're in the last of the perfections, emptiness, perfection of wisdom or emptiness. And I want to just start with the word emptiness. Sometimes people use other words like interdependence. His Holiness says fullness sometimes. Can you start by just talking about what emptiness means and what is the right words for it?
Emptiness in Tibetan, Tongba Ni. Tongba means empty. But when you add that Ni, it means nothingness. And when we talk about emptiness, we are not talking about nothingness, but we are talking about certain nature of something, and that is empty of inherent existence.
For those who've not heard that term, inherent existence, what does that mean? Empty of inherent existence.
Inherent existence means something that exists by itself, inherently by itself, meaning that it doesn't depend on cause, conditions, factors to be able to exist and function as it is, to be able to exist by itself, inherently.
And it's this delusion of ignorance is the opposite, right? When you think that things are separate, solid, independent. Can you talk about why that's so harmful to not see through the lens of emptiness?
We know with our own experience how much we suffer when we are upset, frustrated, impatient, angry, resentment, bitter. We all know how painful it is when we have those strong emotions. Similarly, we all know with our own experience how we experience pain, suffering when we have jealousy, when you have strong desire and not being able to have those objects of desire. If we check on that, where does that come from? Where does this different painful, disturbing emotions arises? There is a verse by Nagarjuna where he talks about the so-called nirvana or liberations, the cessations of the karma and the delusions, is not something external, but is when your mind or when your state is free from that kind of contaminated karma and the afflictive emotion delusion. That is the nirvana, that is the liberations. And so then he talked about where does that come from? It arises because of what I call fabricating thoughts, mind, your mind that navigate or paint or interpret something as pleasant, unpleasant, beneficial, harmful, something meaningful, meaningless. And that kind of fabricating thoughts or the way we interpret the mind, whether it's good, bad, it arises on the basis of that there is an object by itself there from its own side. If we understand there is no object by itself or from its own side, then there's no object to fabricate is a good or bad or pleasant, unpleasant, all of that. And if you don't fabricate this good as bad or distinguish as all of that, then there is no reason to arise an attachment on anger on the basis of that kind of distinguishing that way.
And what would you say to someone who says, what do you mean I'm fabricating good and bad? Like this thing felt very good and this thing hurt and was harmful. What do you say to a person who says that? How do you explain that?
Well, object by itself is neither good or bad. And same object can be good for someone and same object can be bad for someone. Some object can be pleasant for someone, same object can be unpleasant for someone. Same object can be attractive to someone and same object can be unattractive to someone. So from the object side, there is no such thing by itself, something as attractive, unattractive, beautiful, ugly, all of that. It is the persons or the being who see that and how they interact and how they perceive that. All this is fabricating.
Yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
But our mind believe, that fabricated mind believe the beautiness in the object, not in the mind. And that become the problems.
Right. So to see that, the thinking that external object, thing, person is bad or good, that actually it's wrapped up much more with your mind, your conditioning, your experience, the causes and conditions. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. It will be conditioned by your upbringings,
Mhm.
your surroundings, your past experience, different things condition for you to interpret it as a pleasant or unpleasant.
Can you recall a time in your life that emptiness helped you get through something very difficult?
I don't know, I think there are times when I was dealing with maybe fear, worry,
And what were you scared about, worried about?
about certain things,
Yeah.
certain things. Um, and then meditating on emptiness, because in that moment when I was worried or fearful, I felt very strong sense of I or self. And then I tried to do the exercise or analytical meditation. It lead to a point where there is sense of empty of such truly existing inherent self. And once I was able to kind of reach to that point through such reflection, contemplation, meditation, I was able to let go of the fear and the worry. It didn't go completely because I didn't have the realization of emptiness. It is just in that moment. But what it shows is that if I can be in that state of emptiness all the time, then there is no space for the fear and worry to arise.
Mm.
When I'm in that state of the mind, the worry, the fears dissolve because there's no one experiencing that in that moment. But when you are not that state, again, after some time, it manifests. But what it showed me is that if you can have realizations and when you can keep that awareness all the time, then there is no space for such.
So when you feel strong anger, craving, fear, anxiety, to search for that, try to search for that guy.
Who is experiencing all that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
And then you don't find him.
Yeah.
You know?
And you don't find them, and then who is experiencing all of that.
Yeah,
There's no one who is experiencing that.
yeah. But then how does it function? I think then if we've done that meditation, then what is it? Who is Geshe Sherab? What is the Geshe Sherab that is functioning just fine and not scared anymore? If you don't find Geshe Sherab, how is he still functioning? How is he operating and teaching and laughing and having conversation?
There's a way of doing ultimate analysis, a much more deeper level of analysis, and conventional level analysis. Conventional analysis does not go very deep into the very nature of the object itself. But the ultimate analysis is not just about whether Geshe Sherab is hungry or not now, whether Geshe Sherab is feeling good or not, whether Geshe Sherab is busy or not, all of that. Those are conventional analysis, which we do very often. But who is actually Geshe Sherab itself? Who is whether healthy or not healthy, or whether eating or not eating? Who is actually that Geshe itself? Going into the very nature of that being itself. And so when we do that kind of ultimate analysis, one cannot find within each of the aggregates or each of the part of the aggregate, nor outside of aggregates. But still there is someone who's experienced all of that. Chatting now, with podcasts, we are not hallucinating. We haven't taken LSD. So there is someone. And so when we do analyze that we cannot find, therefore there's a this is set up for the self that is merely imputed on the basis of aggregates coming together, on the basis of the collections or aggregate coming together, and it has certain functioning of coming together, and that is how Geshe Sherab exists, and that is how Geshe Sherab function on the basis of that.
And so when you say merely imputed, that means there's this collection of changing, dynamic, interacting parts that you just place a label upon. But how would you unpack that word impute? What does that mean?
Imputes mean giving a label. When someone invents something, new objects, when all things are put together, then it has certain functionings. And at that time, you don't know what that is. It definitely, there is something that has functionings and it has coming together. And then someone give a label. Let's call it iPad, iPhone, And so-called the iPad and iPhone is merely label given on all these chips and everything coming together, and it has certain functionings. Before someone label it, nobody really know it's iPad, iPhone. If someone say, "Can you bring me an iPhone?" Nobody really understand what you are referring to. But once that label has been imputed, given, then everyone understand what that object is, and we can communicate and know what you are talking about.
That's a good way to explain it as an invention, because it is an invention, right? But I like how you describe it with respect to technological inventions. Like until 200 years ago, we didn't have a bicycle, right? Then somebody had the idea to put the wheels on the frame and so on. And then we had the word bicycle. But the word, it didn't exist before then. And we placed this label upon it. So it's merely imputed in that way, right? And then when it comes to Geshe Sherab and Scott Snibbe, we're also inventions, right?
Yes.
That we place the label upon.
Who are invented by our parent.
We were invented by our parents, yes. One day I told my daughter, her name is Samaya, and I said, you know what? You're not a Samaya. And she said, what do you mean? I said, it's just a sound. It's just a sound. We decided when you came out of your mother, we decided to make this sound that refers to you, but you're not a Samaya, And,
How was her reaction?
oh, she loved it. Her mind was blown. She's like, really, really? But I think she has a little bit understanding of this because she often refers to herself in the third person. She says, "Oh, Samaya wants to go to the store right now." It's very helpful to refer to yourself in the third person, like you did, Geshe Sharab. I want to ask you, there's something that's really surprised me as I studied emptiness in our school, is that there are many different ways of understanding emptiness in Buddhism, and they mirror the way that emptiness evolved in Buddhism over thousands of years. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about these schools. We're taught that in an earlier school, you find reality in particles, in atoms, like Newton or Einstein saw reality. And then another one sees it in function, like you were talking about, that you find reality in the function that mirrors some Western philosophical schools too, or that you find reality in the mind, the school that's just the mind only. And then the last one that you've been talking about, the middle way school, that doesn't quite find a solid basis at all in reality. Can you talk a little bit about these schools of reality? Like, why are there different ways of understanding emptiness? And is one of them more right than the other one?
It's not about right and wrong. It's more about ending of the selflessness, even though everyone might not use emptiness. But selflessness is kind of the term that will be used by all the school of thought. Each of those understanding school of thoughts get more subtle and subtle, more deeper and deeper. The earlier two schools, Babasika and Sotantrika schools, their understanding of selflessness is much more gross than what is understood by middle school and mind-only schools. Even in our ignorance, there are many different levels of ignorance. Gross level ignorance, subtle level ignorance, and more subtle level ignorance. And that understanding of the selflessness of gross level can overcome the gross level of the ignorance, but it cannot overcome the subtle level and more subtle level. The more subtle level of the ignorance can be only overcome by the understanding of more subtle level of the reality.
And what do you think of the mind-only school? Like, what do you think that really says about reality? Is everything just in our mind?
Sometimes it is easy to kind of let it go, that there is nothing external object at all. It's all coming from mind. But the problem with the mind-only schools, even though you can overcome attachments to the object because there's no really external object there to be attached to, The problem with that is they believe, even though there's no external object there, but they believe the mind is inherent in existence. So they cannot let go of the grasping to the mind. Even though through that understanding, you can let go of grasping to the external objects, and therefore any delusion that arises in relation to external objects. But when it comes to the mind, they believe that the mind is inherently existing. So then there's grasping to the mind, and therefore, again, you can have a delusion arising in relation to the mind. And therefore, the middle way school is saying not only the external objects are not inherently existing, even the mind is not inherent in existence. And so then that is why they go even more deeper, because not only they negate the external object to exist inherently, but even the internal, the subject, the mind itself is empty of inherent existence. And so therefore, not only you cannot have grasping to the external object, but also internal objects.
So you can still feel like your mind is something solid, separate. What's a practical way that people could think about and use emptiness in their daily lives to counteract the difficulties we have today, like anxiety, fear, craving, competition, conflict?
When I was dealing with fear and worry, meditating on that, who is that I, me, who is experiencing that fear, worry, and so one can do same exercise, who is that I, which is very attached to something, who is very angry to someone. That can be helpful if one do that analysis, that kind of exercises. And if they can come to a point where they know such self that you felt very strongly at the very beginning, there's no self to really experience all of that. And one can do same kind of exercise, analyze with the object of the attachment. So when you do the same analyzing same way, but then there is no object to feel fearful of, no object to feel angry to, there's no object to feel jealousy of, that kind of exercises or meditation can be helpful.
To not just apply the searching to yourself, but to whatever you're feeling, attachment, anger, competitive.
You can apply same exercise.
And is there a way that emptiness helps us with the big problems in the world, like war, politics, climate crisis? How would you use these techniques with those problems?
If you have understanding of emptiness, you will not create those problems. But you might not be able to stop others from creating those problems. You can maybe inspire them. Maybe we might be able to inspire them to see the emptiness, and thereby they stop creating such problems. But I think just by seeing yourself, it doesn't automatically solve all those problems or stop other people from creating the problems. But what it helps is that you will not be so negatively influenced by those events and actions, that you can keep your mind calm, peaceful, and not being affected negatively, agitated and upset and angry and bitter, all of that. And also that you don't create more pain and suffering to others.
What questions are you still asking yourself about emptiness? What are you curious or uncertain about?
When we do that kind of analysis, as is mentioned in the scriptures, the 7 analysis, like the chariot, sometimes I say, what about the collections of all these parts? And not only the collection put together, and it has functioning of the car or chariot, whatever that is. Why is not that the chariot? Why you cannot find that the car, that which not only the collection, because you can have the collection but not put together, but you have a collection all together, and it has that functioning of running what it is supposed to do. When it becomes more technical, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to let go of the grasping completely.
Yeah, because we're taught this analysis where you search, is it in any one of the parts? Is it outside the parts? But you're saying that point where you say, oh, is it the collection of parts? That one is harder to refute.
Not only the collection, even the collections, you can put all these parts together. But if they don't have that functionings of the car functioning, then it wouldn't be. And that makes totally sense. But you put all these together and fit everything that need to function as a car, why wouldn't it be that one? That is my kind of argument.
What do they say? Is there an argument you're convinced by why you don't find it in the collection of parts that's functioning to be Geshe Sherab or a car?
The object of imputing and the imputing itself.
Hmm.
And those two is a separate. It doesn't become a separate, it becomes one. That's why I say it's more technical,
Yeah, very subtle. I've heard Lama Zopa, when he talks about emptiness being merely labeled, he says it's so subtle. It's almost like it doesn't exist, but this is very, very subtle.
Yeah, Rinpoche used this term, it
Mhm.
exists, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, but it exists. The existing, non-existing line is so subtle and so fine, it's hard to differentiate. That is where what they call understanding emptiness is difficult because of that's finding that subtlety. The moment you say there is something functioning, then how can it be merely labeled?
And that's why it's useful to start at earlier levels. Just realizing that we're not the same. I'm not the same Scott Snibby that started this conversation earlier, and you're not the same Geshe Sherab. So starting out with impermanence, realizing that we're not permanent.
Yes, and that is how all the four school of thought is supposed to be like that ground, one understanding help you to lead to the next understanding. So they are not kind of contradictions and conflicting, but actually it's like the steps. That understanding lead to the next level of understanding of selflessness, and that become a support and help and tool for the next level of the understanding.
Well, Geshe, thank you so much for talking to us about emptiness with so much clarity and honesty and humor. I really appreciate you giving us some time, wisdom.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me for this conversation with Geshe Sherab on emptiness, the last in our series on the six perfections. In our next episode, Geshe Sherab leads us in a guided meditation on emptiness to try and help us have some initial experience with this profound state of mind. If you'd like to deepen your meditation practice and connect with a community exploring ideas like those we discuss in the podcast, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. You can sign up for our newsletter there and join our Train a Happy Mind community, which offers weekly meditations, classes, and live discussions. You'll also find links to my book, How to Train a Happy Mind, a practical, contemporary take on Buddhist tools for dealing with our world's persistent challenges and building better relationships in your everyday life. It features a foreword by the Dalai Lama. If this episode had an impact on you, please consider supporting our nonprofit podcast. How to Train a Happy Mind is a project of a skeptic's path to enlightenment. We rely on your generosity to keep our programs free and ad-free. To keep this show on the air, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. All donations are tax-deductible in the U.S., and we gratefully accept cash, credit, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies. Thanks to Isabella Acebal for production and marketing on this episode. We wish you a wonderful day.